Now I got to invite everybody all over again. I pushed the wrong dang button. All right, as I said, we're doing history, so I'm not going to do my opening again because most of you heard what it's about. This is really, it's a lesson to be given to, so when you're having discussion with your white friends or your biracial friends or your crazy black friends that want to be Republicans right now, if you are a black Republican, I'm just going to say it, and I'm sure that I will get in all kinds of black Republicans. So, and when I say coon, I mean you are worse than a house Negro. You're serving up your people on a platter. So, for some of you who started out, you're going to be listening to the same thing again because I think it's very important for me to do the opening because I spent a lot of time on working this for you because I have so many history books, so in between everything that I have, so as I told you, the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution outlined the rights of American citizenship that ratified in 1868. Now, up until that time, only white men, not white women, could be citizens. Only white men, okay, whether you were born here or not. If you were a white man before 1868, you can be a citizen. Now, for 150 years, this Monday, actually, they closed the door to the scheme, as I said, for only white men to be considered slaves. Now, this is going to be a little bit of, I tried to just jot down between all of my books. July 1868 made all born on the U.S. soil citizenship. Then we had the right of residency. See, they had all kinds of schemes for black people. You could have citizenship in the states that allowed you to have citizenship for people of color. So that's why when we talk about DACA, you have all these different laws, sovereign territories in some states, not sovereign in other states. That's the same thing they did to African Americans. And they argue this with the white politicians over probably the last 300 years. Colonization of societies tried to pressure black people to relocate to Africa, Canada, or the Caribbean. So if you saw 12 Years a Slave, you saw that they did a lot of going back on boats. They didn't know the language. All they knew was they need to get out of this white man's country and get back to Africa. We way past 12 Years a Slave, so we ain't nobody going nowhere unless you're going to visit, okay? We also, if we did go back to Africa and you had family here, unlike some white people who live here now, they can have dual citizenship. Africans, we cannot have dual citizenship if we want to run for office. Now, you can have, I know a lot of Nigerians that have a dual citizenship. So they can go back to their country, buy land, invest and all those things. But because we don't know, some of us, unless you took that white man's DNA test that they were giving out Ancestry.com, you may not know where you came from. All right, so they regulated the daily life of black Americans in a pressure to help us or to make us self-deport. They exiled us out of certain states or banished us from certain states if you did something that they thought was illegal. So they what you call immigrate, E-M-I-G-R-A-T. Now let me give you some surprising tips. The Irish people did not become citizens to Article 3 of the Constitution on April 5th, 1935. Why is that important? When Lincoln decided that he was going to free slaves, he never put in an amendment. He never added anything to the Constitution that specifically said black people were slaves, that were no longer slaves. He never put anything in the Constitution that made slavery illegal. The only thing he said is that the slaves of the Confederates were free. Not the slaves of the Union, only the slaves of the Confederates, which half of them didn't know until 5 years later. Okay? So in 1992, the Italians could have dual citizenship. Okay? But they got here, the Italians came, if they were born in the United States, they had birthright citizenship. Now, Italians got birthright January 1st, 1948. So don't think y'all got all of that. We've been here 1619, okay? 1619. 1619. Italians were not made citizens until it was ratified. It came to the Constitution Board in 1912. But it was not ratified until January 1st, 1948. So the Italians, through their lineage, if any of their parent of the two, you only needed one to be born in America. If the other was actually born in Italy, that's why a lot of people go back to their homeland. Your child could have dual citizenship in both America and in Italy. Now let's go with the Jews. Now, the Jews that were from Israel. Now, you know Jews come from everywhere. Jews that came from Israel on July 5th, every time this thing blank off, I'm going to repeat myself. So if you hear me repeating myself, it's because you blanked out. On June 5th, 1950, gave Jews the right to go back to Israel and gain Israeli citizenship. Because after, Hitler and the Holocaust, a lot of Jews tried to return home. If you came back, a law was ratified in 1950 that allowed any Jew, wherever you fled from the war or persecution, you could come back to Israel. You could come back to Israel in 1950, specifically July 5th, and that gave back any Israeli Jew citizenship. Now, between 1820 and 1924, Jews began to migrate to the United States because they were fleeing economic hardship, persecution, political upheaval. But most of those Jews came from Central Europe. Now, that is the same argument that Doc is making. They are running from hardship. They're running for their lives from gangs. They're running from persecution if you're against the politics. So all of that was all good for the Jews, but it doesn't seem like it was good for DACA. So America accepted all Jews propelled to their native land by prosecution or who had lack of economics the opportunity of citizenship in the United States. On January 31st, 1920, Polish people became citizens by birthright. Okay, so if you came here and you migrated here, you were not a citizen. But if you had children here, your children became citizens in 1920. Okay, on June 2nd, 1924, an enactment by the Indian Citizenship Act of state law. Now, I want you to hear this because this is about the craziest nonsense ever. Do you know? Now, listen to this quickly. You know that the white man came here in 1609. Remember? They rolled up on Plymouth Rock. Well, more importantly, when they rolled up on Plymouth Rock, this entire country was occupied by Native Americans. Now, I want to take y'all back because I want you to tell me, and I don't know where you live, if you're living anywhere close, when is the last time you've seen a true Native American? Guess what? Native Americans were not considered citizens in their own goddamn land until 1957. 1957. I need somebody need to tell me why it took almost 350 years for you to tell people, like, all right, I'm going to roll up to your house. You got beautiful land. You got a magnificent house. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that. I'm going to put my name on the deed. I said, you know what? 300 years I've been here since I took this house from y'all. All right, y'all can live here. Y'all can live here now. Can't live in the house, but you could just live here. Okay, that was just being funny. So Native Americans, by an act, state law, could have citizenship. Now, I don't know if you understand, and I don't think it's necessary to go through it here because it's long. All over this country, there are reservations of Native Americans. In their decree, many Native Americans, they were not forgiving white men for what they did to them. They didn't give a damn what you decreed up in your law. So as a truce, they allowed certain parts of the United States as sovereign territory to the Native Americans. But to be funky, as nasty and decrepit as white people can be sometimes, they said, okay, you can be a sovereign citizen, but guess what? You can't vote. You don't have the right to Social Security. You don't have a right to unemployment. You don't have a right to health care. You don't have a right to anything except, y'all want to be separate? Okay, y'all be separate over there, but you don't have a right to any of the things that we do over here. How about that? You done stole their land, and then you tell them you don't have a right to anything that you flourish from the land, because tomorrow I'm going to get into everything that black people built, okay, in this country. Because right now I just need to let you know the separations and why white people are so crazy dogmatic. So white immigrants have not always been considered whites. Italians in the 1800s through the 1900s were not considered white upon arrival, okay? So next time y'all see y'all Italian friends, let them know y'all just became white in America in the 1900s, okay? That's less than 200 years ago, all right? All right, Italians, Greeks, Poles, Hungarians, Slavians, Europeans were called new immigrants. Now, the new immigrants could become white, but this was the criteria in becoming white. One, they had to overcome their subordinate behavior, in other words, do as the white Englishman said, but would make you white faster. Okay? It was some white man, you can look him up, his name is Henry. It's gonna keep blocking out, but they ain't gonna block out this history I'm gonna give y'all today. In 1911, it was a white man named Henry Pratt Fairchild. He was an influential white sociologist. He said that these groups that came from Europe and Middle America can acquire white if you cleaned yourself up, you know? Because I don't know if you know, the word ghetto is not an American term. So if you want to talk about Jewish tropes on All About the Benjamins that Jews wanted to lose their mind over, ghettos that term came from Germany because that's where the Jews lived. And so the word ghetto didn't get here until Jews got here, and then they put that on us. Now, this was a crucial method that white men told the Europeans and the Jews how you could become white faster. It was crucial that they were ultimately willing to meet the burden of success that had no integration with white people, with black people, number one. You could not have any integration with white people. So you had to prove that you had no integration. Well, I don't know. Yes, you had some babies with some black woman, and you done left them because you want to be an American. More importantly, you have to do what 45 is doing right now. You had to become active in helping to maintain the racist society against black people. So they all took up and started joining every racist organization, because if they proved that they were a member of a racist organization against the annihilation of African Americans who did not, or descendants of slaves, for slaves who didn't want to immigrate or self-deport, if you helped us to help and annihilate this particular group, you could become a citizen faster, okay? So in 1886, about 192, and this thing is going all off, from 1886 to 1920, 13 million new immigrants came from southern and eastern parts of Europe. If you came from those two areas, you were not considered white. Only those from England were considered white. So those who came from anywhere but England, you had to prove yourself white worthy by helping to annihilate and eliminate the black race, because we were multiplying faster, we were stronger, and if it was and any one-on-one, we was whooping that ass. So they wanted these Europeans to come in and help them to kill us, and that's why you see all these crazy white people at these rallies. They're still putting this into their heads. Netherlands, Ireland, Germans, Scandinavians were also, they came later and as immigrants, and they were also filled with the same duties. If you wanted to become a white, if you just wanted to be white, you could not integrate, and you had to belong to an organization that helped annihilate African Americans. Now, I'm sorry that this may hurt some of your feelings, because I know a lot of you are Catholic. Many of them were Catholics, okay? Now, what a lot of these immigrants did, because they had white skin, they could do this faster if they changed their names. Again, later on tonight, it's my neighbor doing his damn grass. Later on tonight, I'm going to go down the list of everyone in this country who you think is white, but because they changed their names, you don't know that they're not white. Some of them are Polish, some of them are Irish, some of them are Italian, and a lot of them are Jews. But then the Jews start accumulating money, then they wearing their Jews real high. And now in the states where they have these rules, in order to, if you were in these rules, whether you were Irish, Scandinavian, German, Italian, whatever, depends on the state, you were white by pecking order. So the English white people were able to say who was the most white. Were the Irish most white? Were the Jews most white? Were the Germans, the Polish, the Scandinavians, the Greeks? Who was the most whitest? They got determined state by state how white you could be to be on the white status, okay? Now, example, Greeks looked like, because of their color, they were always mistaken for being Mexican or Puerto Rican or mulattoes, which was against the law. Now, you know, we have owned Puerto Rico. Well, we ain't owned. White man took Puerto Rico in 1892. Never made Puerto Rico a state. Okay? Puerto Rico is mixed up by a lot of Spaniards and Indians. That island was mixed by Spaniards and Indians. And some of the slaves, like everybody knows, Columbus never set foot on the United States. He set foot on Puerto Rico. So some of the Africans were left on Puerto Rico. So you have Puerto Ricans in all different shades. And I don't want to offend my Puerto Rican brethren, but I ain't seen no races worse than here than in Puerto Rico. They racist as hell in Puerto Rico, all right? So in Utah, Greeks and Italians were not considered. Let me hit you again, just in case it blinked off. Greeks and Italians in Utah. Now, Utah's filled with some Mormons. I'm going to give you the Mormon lesson on another day. But Utah did not consider Greeks and Italians to be classified as whites. Now, I don't know who told them that they got the sovereignty of God to say who was or who wasn't. One thing that all of these immigrants who came over here from the Statue of Liberty had in common: if you joined in the forces against Black America, you could gather wealth, you could gather status, you could gather property, loans, you could move in neighborhoods, build your own houses, as long as you did not integrate with Black people. And as long as you helped to continue with the oppression of Black people, you, Greeks and Italians and Irish and Jews and Slavians and Russians, all of you can become white. The only group that came here that never could infiltrate into being white are the Asians. Now let me give you a big hoo-ha-ha if you didn't know this. Russia is in Asia. Okay? Go and get your globe. I'm going to give you a chance. Go get your globe. Because Russia is in Asia. So, only Japanese and Chinese look Asian. Mongolia is in between that little space between China and Russia. Mongolians. The Mongolians are the biggest, burliest Asians that you ever seen because they're a lot of mixture of whatever the ethnicity makeup of the original Russia and Asia. And then you got this big old swath of people that are Mongolians that they're big, but they got Asian eyes and they're huge. Those are some of the biggest women I've ever seen in all of my life because they've done some big ass girls over there. So this is one of the things that they get away with is continuing the divide. So ignorant white people don't read. Ignorant white people didn't finish high school like ignorant black people who don't want to finish high school. But you're not finishing high school could be for a lot of reasons. One, just think of when they let us go to school. We've been here now 400 years. We've only been going to their schools for less than 100. Less than, not even 100. The integration schools in 1965. So we've been here for 400 years. You gave us subpar education, but yet some of the greatest scientists in this and born on this land were black. You gave us no money, startup money for our companies. Tomorrow, I'm going to give you a lesson on all of the experiments and all of the discoveries of this country that the credit for the patents, although patented by white people, were made by black people. Why? Black people could not have a patent. You could not own anything you made. Now, some of you hip-hop artists and musicians from the 70s and 60s, and maybe even from the 80s. Like, one of the greatest things that Michael Jackson did was to buy the rights to the music of the Beatles. Michael Jackson bought the rights to the Beatles' music. Most American singers, they go bust because they're so happy about getting a contract. This thing keep going off. I think here's what I'm saying. A lot of the contracts were not made in the best interest of the client. So a lot of these young music artists are not wealthy, not because they didn't make a lot of money. They just didn't get the money they made. And some of the black, and all from Motown to Hollywood, black people did the same thing to black people. So I'm not calling names, but you know how a whole lot of black people who were famous and you're wondering, how the hell don't they have any money? They gave up their contracts. And in their contracts, they didn't go with lawyers who read the fine lines. All right, so this is something that was just too much for me to even put on my diagram. So the answer, it sounds obvious. We know white person we see, at least white people we think we see. So keeps blanking out. Remember how I told you people were passing? Well, the one thing that white people have in common, no matter where they're born, normally is their complexion. Scotland, Scandinavia, Switzerland are some of the whitest Caucasoids on Earth. So they came in and were easier to infiltrate because all they had to do was change their name and say, you know, that they were English and learn how to speak English well. But when the Italians poured into America in the 1800s, it became a big deal. So they sought to overcome their subordination by showing through their behavior to be deserving of being white. Now, I can't even make this stuff up. I'm going to let you do your research, but I'm not telling you anything that I'm not getting. It's the underdefeat.com, which is where I go for a lot, because they condense a lot of the history that I do, is the underdefeat.com. And this particular information I'm giving you comes from white immigrants weren't always considered white. And I've had so many books I didn't want to have to pull them all together. So this way it was easier. Italians that immigrated on board a ferry from the docks of on the island of my Statue of Liberty. If you came to the Statue of Liberty, you had to fill out all these different papers. You were tracked, and then you were determined, did you fulfill all these white category things to become white? Okay, a lot of them went, so you had to gain societal status. The quickest societal status for Italians and Irish were the police department and the fire department. So they ran the police departments and the fire departments all around the country. So what you see is generations of white police officers that were trained, because when you hear white people talk, they tell you, my father was a police officer, my grandfather, I come from 5 generations of police officers. If you hear a white man say, I come from 5 generations of police officers, they are telling you, I came from 5 generations of racists. Because you had to be a racist or prove your racism. You know how with the gangs, in order for you to jump in to a gang, you have to go kill somebody? They didn't make that up. I'm just going to just give it to you real. They didn't make that up. That was the same rule that they had for Irish. That was the same rule for Irish and Italians. To prove yourself white, you had to kill a black person. Now, it's hard to take. I know it's hard to woosah, but I'm not going to give you some bull crap because if I'm lying, I'm flying because they're still doing it right now. And they covered up for them. That's why you don't see indictments. If you fulfilled your obligation of being white by killing a black person, why would they then put you in jail over it? You did what you were told. All right? And then it becomes part of the culture. The things that I thought that was important. Now, I told you okay. Now, I understood this after finishing reading a book. It was by this guy named David Rogers. Working Toward Whiteness is what the book is called. David, his last name is Roediger. He wrote a book called Working Towards Whiteness. Now, I read this book like umpteens ago. But the book, it will tell you how new immigrants became white between 1886 and 1925. And like I said, they came from Southern, Eastern, and Central European. Upon that point, people considered white generally hailed from England, the Netherlands, Ireland, Germany, Scandinavian countries. Roderick, which was a professor at the University of Illinois, now this is what they teaching your kids in some of these schools that they're going to right now, argued that new immigrants, until they were fully brought into the white family, lived in states of in-betweenness. Okay, whatever so these white people that you see following around Trump, they lived in places of in-betweenness because some of them never did or never was able to gain full whiteness. We just stopped differentiating them, and they started differentiating themselves because they were not black. That's all they had going for them. And this is what they said. If we're living in in-betweenness, at least we are in pecking order and we are all white above people of color. So they said, I don't care. I may not ever be rich, but I'm better than a nigga. Okay? So the new influx of immigrants led to an apocalypse prediction about the impending doom of awaiting America. Foreigners would impose their inferiority biologically, peculiarly with religious practices. Now remember, I told y'all about that King James version, all right? Who the hell was King James, and why does he have a version of supposedly the Word of God? But we'll get on religion at another time. So many held that they were white rather than members of the lower biological order because they were Christians and they believed in King James Version. The kinder view held that they were simply culturally inferior, dirty, less intelligent, criminal prone, but not and could not assimilate. Now that wasn't even for black people. Until you could prove you was a white person, those were what they thought you were if you weren't from England. You can keep on blacking off if you want to, because I'm going to keep talking. Okay. Not being considered white led to new immigrant. Robert F. Forster wrote in 1924, in a country where the distinction between white man and black is intended as a distinction of value, it is no compliment to the Italian to deny him his whiteness, but that actually happens with considerable frequency. So in other words, how dare you? How dare you say that Italians who have lighter skin are not white? They are not black. They are superior. A mother freakers. I'm going to end this class for the day because I'm going to come back to you tonight. Every group came after the African Americans who got here in 1916 became white by proving their superiority, was what you see 45 talking about every day. Not just above, now y'all think they talking about us. They're also above the natives. Native Americans were not considered citizens, and still to this day, many Native Americans have never voted. Now, we have 2 new Native Americans in the House of Representatives. They redlined Native Americans onto these territories, and basically they said, if you want to live on these territories, you can't do anything that we progressively have here. So right now, Native Americans, they introduced alcohol to them. They have the biggest alcoholism in their communities. They introduced oxycodone, which of course, if you're white and you have an issue with drugs for oxycodone, that's a health hazard. Yet when we were being influxed with heroin and cocaine, because we were good with weed, white man decided he want to throw over something a little, kick you a little high up a little bit, something that actually deteriorated your brain, because they tried that already with the Native Americans. So they have the highest in infant born. Most of their children die in birth because they're not in hospitals. They have the highest lung cancer because the tobacco. They have a shortest mortality rate under us. This is how we prove that we are kings and queens. This is how we prove our greatness. This is 2020. We've been here since 1816. You done bought every white man from around the world. We blew up Hiroshima, but we built back China bigger than it was before. With Japan bigger than it was before. In fact, if you ever go to Hawaii, just like we have a base on Cuba and we don't own Cuba, Guantanamo Bay is connected to Cuba. We still stealing people's land. Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba. When we blew up Hiroshima, there is a part of Hawaii that's all Japanese, but it's American territory. I used to have a house in Kona, and so sometimes I would go up to the mountainous areas where they had like the rainforest. So my ex-husband and I, we used to just drive, because when you have a house there, I tell you, if you ever go to Hawaii, you better bring some food and find yourself a Walmart, because the food is expensive as hell. It's beautiful to see. I don't know how people live there, because you have to. Everything on the island of Hawaii has been imported there. They stole the queen. I'll tell you the whole story about how white people took Hawaii on another day, because I'm still trying to get us above. So if you are spending 400 years trying to prove your superiority, it's obvious that we're kings. It's obvious that we're queens. You couldn't kill us off. You couldn't hang us off. You couldn't shoot us fast enough. You always come from behind when you shoot, even when we run. Because we were always standing face to face in the midst of death, knowing the possibility we may die. But if you're going to kill me to my face. Kill me eye to eye if you're a man. See, what Ku Klux Klan was such punk asses. They would put a bag over your face. If you gonna kill me, come to my face. But let me tell you, Takwase, Yejide Sekou, I will always be an American. I may be of African descent, but I am an American citizen. That 14th Amendment you wrote for white men, sorry, it included me. More importantly, you come for me and mine. I believe in the entire Constitution, the Second Amendment right to bear arms and to protect my home. I am Takwase Yejide Sekou, Queen, image of her mother, which was Yejide, you see on my page. Yejide means image of her mother. Sekou means warrior. So I am a queen warrior, born in America, a descendant of a slave. But America is my country. You may not have thought it when you wrote that Constitution, but I was here when you wrote it. You just intentionally left me out. But you can't leave out what's mine. You can't leave out what I built. If I build a house and I move in it, it's mine. We built that White House. The only one who's ever lived in it that it was legitimately theirs is Barack and Michelle. Built by Africans of America, descendants of slaves. Even in our kidnapping, you cannot get rid of us. We will thrive and we will continue to multiply. We'll fight you until the death. This is not a threat, but if you want to make a war 45 and you want to come after me and mine or all of us, we will be ready. We will not back down. We will not hide. We will be scared no longer. And those of you who are scared are just like as weak as the white man, so go on over there. Because when we go to war, when you come after us, we're going to be ready. At that poll on November 3rd, every last black person in this freaking country, or if you on vacation, bring your happy asses back. Because it ain't going to be cute. It ain't going to be cute. I don't need to threaten. Because I threaten you by my black appearance. I threaten you by my dark skin. I threaten you by my nappy hair. I threaten you because I do not bow down to you. Do you understand that? You roll up on the queen, I reign at all times. I am the makeup of the mitochondrial makeup DNA. We as black women, we own that DNA. Only one woman, only one female has that gene. One human female has a gene that is in every single ethnic group in the entire makeup of mankind. And that's a black woman. We are the mother of all civilization. If you started out with Adam and Eve, ain't but one mama. Bow down to your mother, because she holds her high. Always as a queen. Yes.